sure do. I can't, if I can remember it. Okay. Then let's stand, well, okay, tell me when. Okay.
Okay, we'll call this meeting to order. The Monday, April 1st, 2019 City Council meeting, regular meeting. Can we get a roll call? Oh, sorry. Pledge of Allegiance, Claudia Raniker. Please, if you will.
You're welcome. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can we get a roll call?
Councilmember Hundley,
Here.
Councilmember Cook,
Here.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Here.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Here?
Mayor Harrington.
Here.
Thank you.
We don't have any report out from a closed session, so the next item is the approval of the agenda. If anyone has any changes to the agenda, the order of the agenda, they can make a motion at this time. And I would like to make a motion myself that item 6.4 be heard after item 6.2.
I would like to make a motion to approve the agenda with that change.
Second.
Can we get a roll call?
Councilmember Hundley,
Yes.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Great. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Under state law, unless otherwise permitted under the Ralph M. Brown Act, the merits of the matters presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the City Council at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for council consideration. Upon being acknowledged, please step to the podium and speak into the microphone and begin by stating and spelling your name and giving your address.
David Eicher, E-I-C-H-A-R. I'm here again to speak about the 1% TOT. So 2 weeks have passed, we're getting to peak season. So we're losing out about $10,000 a week. So far, $20,000 is not on agenda again. I really don't understand. Should be something very simple, a resolution by the City Council to pick a specific date to start the TOT increase. And then a notification and a small update to the form to submit the additional 1%. So please get this on agenda soon. And, you know, I haven't seen it on one. I have no idea when. So if you do have a date, I'd like to hear that date, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I hate Claudia Raniker, 300 2nd Street East, and I hate to be another guy that says, I'm back. Okay, but here I go. The City of Sonoma has the means and the ability to function on renewable energy. And because the city functions on clean energy, all the trees in the park are lit with thousands and thousands and thousands of LED lights at Christmas. In order to do that, a professional lighting company is recruited from another city to come several days in a row to install and uninstall the thousands of lights, resulting in an oversight of a carbon footprint that is in conflict to the climate change executive order to drastically reduce the carbon emissions in the state. Whether the trees are lit or not has no effect on the city's ability to function nor its ability to govern. The city is not compromised, making the lighting of thousands of lights unnecessary. I am only concerned about the oversight of the carbon footprint. I understand there are those who praise the city with approval and accolades, enticing the city to continue its behavior of overindulging them with all the lights. They will use words like beautiful and tradition to get the city to assume responsibility for responsibilities the city is not responsible for. And then there are those who only want what they are due from the city, which is safety and peace. It is because of all these reasons I am asking you to consider this solution to reduce your carbon footprint. In order to honor those that want the city to give them beautiful and tradition, and in order to honor those that only want what they are due from the city, peace and safety, and in order to honor our most beautiful and giving planet that our self-serving ways are killing, it is only reasonable and fair to eliminate all the lights on the trees at Christmas and to continue with our original tradition of a beautiful but modestly lit city hall with its tree and its stables until it is no longer safe to do that. Because 2018 was the fourth hottest year on record, because Greenland is melting 4 times faster than expected, because climate change has claimed its first victim, and because people are still having babies, and because the city is behaving as if nothing is going on, I would like to hear your response to this too, is what you plan to do someday in the future. And I think not only because of me, but I think the whole city, the whole town deserves to know where you're leading us with respect to global warming and how we can drastically reduce the carbon footprint that happens here as a result of city actions. Okay? All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Public comment? Okay.
Hello, my name is Mike Zakowski. I'm a baker here in town. I live at 1777 West Waltmall Road. I just want to bring up the issue of glyphosate and
Excuse me. So this is public comment on any item not on the agenda, and we have an item for glyphosate today, and you're welcome
the
to.
agenda?
It is on the agenda.
Excellent. Cool. Is it
So please come
talking
back.
about the city itself, or like just the public areas?
It's about a complete ban in the city. But please don't leave and stay and make your comments at that time. Anyone else want to comment on an item not on the agenda? Okay, seeing no one come to the podium, I'm going to close public comment. All items listed on the consent, moving on to the consent calendar, item 4. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. We do have a meeting dedication tonight, and Councilmember Agrimonti is going to make it.
Thank you. I was remiss in leaving some information at home. I wanted to dedicate this evening's meeting to Lilla Gilbrecht Weinberger, Sonoma bookstore owner, political activist and organizer, and friend to many. Died on March 24th following a fall down a flight of stairs. She was 77. She and her husband Andy met at a very young age. I think it was possibly 12 or 14, which I find is pretty darn amazing. They were married for 44 years. She has 2 sons, Gideon, whose wife's name is Colleen, and also Tobias, wife's name is Jan. I met her probably 3 weeks ago. We went on a tour of the Sebastiani Theater because they were, just presenting a lot of information, Roger Roten, about the capital campaign they want to get into for the Sebastiani Theater. And she was so effervescent. And I thought, well, this is going to be very successful, even though it's a large amount of money. But I think it was amazing, and it's just a shame we've lost somebody so important to this community. Death is a tough thing anyway, but it's, she really is going to leave a vacuum here in the city of Sonoma. So that's Lilla Weinberger.
Thank you. I just want to echo every person I've discussed her passing with has been so upset and valued her so much. And she has such a great family. And I've seen Tobias perform his magic show many times. And it is a real loss for our community. So I'm trying to make sure that we send our dedication to their family. Okay. We don't have any presentations tonight, so on to the consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. At this time, council may decide to change the order of the agenda. Are there any council members who have comments about the consent calendar? No, I'll take it out to the public. If any member of the public would like to make comments on the consent calendar, you may do so now. Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the council. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the consent calendar?
Second.
Roll call?
Councilmember Hundley,
Aye.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
And there are no public hearings tonight, so on to the regular calendar of the City Council. Item 6.1, consideration, discussion, and possible action to accept the City of Sonoma Housing Element 2018 Annual Progress Report and direct staff to distribute to the Governor's Office of Planning and to the California Department of Housing and Community Development and the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. And I will turn it over to the Planning Community Services Director, David Storer.
Good evening, Mayor Harrington and council members. Waiting for a slide to pop up. Just very briefly, this first, do you see it on the screen? On your screens? There we go. For just two slides, basically, just to show you the context within which we're reporting tonight. Under our state housing law, we are required as a city to present to you our annual planning or progress report with respect to the housing element and what we've done with respect to housing. It's typically a thing that's done through most communities throughout the state. Just in context, we get a relationship started with the Housing and Urban Development and creating the RENA numbers. Those numbers get worked and the income levels get worked out with HCD, at which point they're then transferred down to ABAG. And from ABAG, they get distributed to all of the communities within ABAG.
David, there's a world of acronyms in planning. Can maybe you explain what RENA is, explain what ABAG is?
Sorry.
Thank you.
So HUD is the Housing and Urban Development federal government, and they actually do the numbers, so to speak, from our census. The last one, of course, is 2010, and we're preparing for a new census coming up. HCD is the State Department of Housing and Community Development that produces the number of existing and future homes that each community within the Council of Governments, in this case it would be ABAG, the Bay Area Government Council of Governments, the COG, Council of Governments, and the state of California is divided up into lots of COGs. And from those COGs, that doesn't sound right, but through those ABAG, and there's another one called SANDAG, you might have heard of that, or SACOG, they're all over the place. But the point being is they're responsible for distributing the numbers to the agencies within that particular Council of Governments. And so as we embark on a general plan, the theory is that the housing element will contain those RENA numbers, the regional housing needs allocation that we get from Housing and Community Development. And so as we go through each year of our cycle of that RENA number, and by the way, HCD creates these RENA numbers for an 8-year cycle. So they give them to you, you're expected to kind of blend that information into the components of the general plan vis-a-vis the housing element and the land use element. So you have that context of having an annual report to see if you've been good boys and girls with respect to developing your housing element and the programs and implementations within your housing element. And in a perfect world, the timing of your housing element will synchronize with that 8-year cycle of your RENA numbers or your allocation that's been given to a city. So within Sonoma County, every city has its RENA number, and we actually have our allocation, which is shown on the next slide. The April 1st date is the date when local agencies have to provide their RENA report card, if you will, to HCD for them to then collate 480 cities or whatever the number is in 58 counties and dump it into a report to legislature. So our regional housing needs allocation is on the bottom slide there, if you will, where we've been given 137 dwelling units. And this number here and the one for the 4 income categories that you see, the very low, the low, moderate, and above moderate, those are given to us not to make those units appear, but to be able to give the opportunity for the market to provide them and for us to then give building permits away for them. So the math is such that we have to have enough yellow on our map, brown on our map, orange on our map to show those increased densities, to show that these numbers can be built. If they're not on the map in order to be able to be built, you get into trouble with HCD, and that's when they come knocking on your door telling you to go paint your town brown to get high densities on your zoning map. Yellow being the least dense, orange a little bit more dense, brown very dense, if you will. And it's a standard planning color thing that we have going. So the long story short here is that we have a RENA number of 137 units, and you can see on that bottom slide that we have an 18% for the very low, the 24 being a percentage of the 137 total. So we do have a general plan map that shows that these numbers can be built. Otherwise, we'd have found out about that a long time ago. We have 17% in the low, 20% of moderate, and 63%, which is basically your market rate housing. Communities get in trouble with HCD if they're not able or refuse to paint their town with above moderate housing. In other words, if you can't make that number, you're not going to make any of the lower income categories. That's the theory. And so if you look through at the top slide, you'll see that through the first 4 years of our reporting period, of those 8 years, starting in 2015, you can see that there's not been a whole lot of building permits issued. This is not houses constructed, but it's those that we've issued in order for the market to build them. And then when you add the report in the middle chart, which is the good news for this evening, you'll see that we've actually entitled homes in 2018 that have not pulled the building permits, but will do so in 2019. And in addition, we've entitled in 2019 that they very may well be issued building permits in 2019. So when you add those two components together to what we've reported cumulatively, again, you're looking tonight at the 2018 report that's going to be issued for all of our activity from January to December of 2018. Add that all together, and you can see that we will have, at the end of the next reporting cycle, 148% of our RENAs. So we've been doing a very good job on doing those things that we've needed to do as far as our housing element and the implementation of the policies that are contained therein. The good news is, obviously, you can see from here very quickly, if you look at the very low in the middle chart, you'll see the 38 there. That's the Saha project, Altamira. And you can also see that we also have Mockingbird in there as well. So it's a good report card, and congratulations to the council. 2 points. Number one is you'll see that with these numbers in 2019, you'll be at 60% through your cycle. So there's another 40% of the cycle yet with additional housing coming on board within the city. And so we do expect this to be an increased number. And then secondly, the point here is, the policy point is, we're not going to stop just because we've met our numbers. That's never been the goal of the state, is to continue on to show that we can do a good job with respect to meeting those policy calls. That concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you very much. Does anyone on the council have questions? Councilmember Hundley.
Could you briefly talk a little bit about the lawsuit against Huntington Beach? Because I know some people have seen that in the news and they're worried that something like that could come here, but I believe it relates to this.
Yeah, so SB 35, which was passed in 17, became effective in 18, basically broke those communities in the state into 3 categories: those that are complying with building their moderate and also having a certain percentage of the proportion of what they're supposed to be getting. Huntington Beach is not one of those. Neither is the city of Sonoma. There's about 24 of them up until when somebody hits the press button on the April 1st report cards this year. I suspect they'll go up to maybe the 30s and 40s of those communities that have done everything that they need to be doing. Santa Rosa is one of those 24. We at the city here are in the second category, along with about 300 other communities where We have actually started along the progress. We're not quite where we need to be. And we may be subject to a streamlining provision that should certain developments come in with a certain amount of affordable housings, there's basically no discretion. It's a ministerial, you're doing it whether you want to or not kind of an approach. Nobody's knocked on our door with that provision. Why? Because we require 20% anyway. And so with respect to Huntington Beach, they've done nothing with respect to meeting any of their above moderate or any of their low income categories. I'm sorry, they're in the third tier of about another 160, I think it is, from the 320 and then the 24 above that.
Thank you. Any other council questions? Seeing none, I'll open it up to the public. If any member of the public would like to comment on this item, come forward.
What will happen if you don't?
I'm just gonna, even though we know your name. if you just
Claudia
give me-
Raniker, 302nd Street East. What will happen if you don't meet all these requirements?
We'll answer the questions at the end of public comment.
Okay.
David Eicher, E-I-C-H-A-R, and yes, done a great job, and I know all of you have said affordable housing, workforce housing is important to the city. Done a great job, but could have done better. I have from the minutes from April 16th, 2016, where the City Council approved the Nexus study on impact fees and possibly also looking at the inclusionary requirements for affordable housing and possibly increasing it or requiring more of the low-income housing, which we were I'm not meeting on that. And then from the March 20th, 2017, that's when the Nexus study was first presented to the City Council. And it's incorrect in the report, by the way. It says that was commissioned in 2017. It was actually in 2016. And then 2018, again, it was presented to the City Council 1 year ago. So you've had the draft report for 2 years. You haven't set an impact fee, so how many thousands of dollars we lost because of impact fee. You haven't adjusted any inclusionary housing. So how many affordable housing could we have had with all this building and permits that have gone on since that time? So I understand it is coming up soon, and so when it does come up next, the City Council meeting, please make the decision and go forward so that you can get everything in place, so we can get more affordable housing and those numbers get even higher. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one come forward, I'll close public comment. And can we have an answer from staff on the two questions? One, what are the consequences of not meeting our numbers? And two, when is the Nexus study coming back?
So in the case of Huntington Beach, going back to that story, they'll be compelled probably by a judge to do whatever policy the housing element tells them to be doing, and they don't get any monetary sanctions that I'm aware of. Having worked in a jurisdiction that refused to build some of these affordable housings and thumb their nose up, it did take a court case to compel us to go paint the town brown and rezone property, and we started off with city property to do that. There's no other penalty. It's just that you just have to show that the market can be there. So if there's a refusal to even paint brown, higher density stuff, you'll get a call from HCD, and I think they're now showing a willingness to do that. With respect to the second question, with respect to the Housing Trust Fund, or
I think the question is, when is the Nexus study coming back? And that's a question for the city manager.
Yeah, so as council knows, we've had a new planning director and kind of transition, and we're working through some backlog. So we have a consultant is engaged in working on some of there's a question on the hotel, that piece coming back. And then there is both a fee resolution and then an inclusionary ordinance that needs to be finished. So we are looking at timing of that to try to bring the fee resolution could come forward separately than the inclusionary. The inclusionary will need to go through planning commission and forward. So the thought process is we could potentially bring the fee resolution sometime by June, and then the inclusionary may take a little longer. So, but this is a piece of work that we're working on.
Thank you. Okay, and what is the action you need on this item?
It's just acceptance of the report so that we can hit the send button tonight.
Great. Do we have a motion on that? Motion to accept
So
the
moved to
report?
accept the report?
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Hundley,
Aye.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Moving on to item 6.2, discussion, consideration, and possible action to further limit or ban the application of glyphosate-based herbicides on city property and to direct city staff to amend the city's integrated pest management policy as necessary. And I will turn it over to the Public Works Director.
Thank you, Mayor Harrington and members of the council. Our last discussion regarding the use of glyphosate to control weeds on city property was on December 17th, 2018. At that time, you banned the use of glyphosate-based herbicides in all city parks and along bicycle paths. You also asked staff to return with additional information regarding the implications of a complete ban on the use of glyphosate on city properties. On the behalf of the Public Works Department, I want to thank you for giving us these very busy and wet winter months to think carefully about weed control needs in the city and options available to staff for controlling the weeds. Over the years, the city has reduced the use of glyphosate-based herbicides from 18 gallons in the year of 2000 to 6 gallons in 2017 to less than 1 gallon in 2018. Due to the wet weather so far in 2019, staff and the city's contractors have not applied any glyphosate-based herbicides on city property in this year, 2019. Staff is recommending contracting for manual labor, manual methods of weed control to eliminate general application of glyphosate-based herbicides on city property. So we've thought about it and we think there's better approaches to a lot of the areas that we have used glyphosate in the past, although we have very much minimized those as well. Now, some invasive species are very hard to control and are more of a risk for our maintenance workers. These include poison oak, star thistle, blackberry bushes, and big ivy vines. These species can occur in public landscape, wildland, and easement areas such as the Sonoma Overlook Trail, Montini Preserve, and the city's cemeteries. They could quickly become uncontrolled if allowed to grow. Blackberry bushes and ivy vines can be cut back with manual methods, and just the stumps are left then that could be treated to with a concentrated spot treatment, so that they don't just come back in full force as these plants tend to do and become unmanageable and hazardous to the public and to our maintenance workers. And so staff recommends that the City Council ban the use of glyphosate-based herbicides on city property with limited and controlled application allowed to invasive species such as poison oak, star thistle, and blackberry and ivy stumps. Please understand that the Public Works Department does receive complaints from the public about weeds on city property. You'll probably receive complaints like this too. And so it would be helpful if the community, who through their representatives may support a complete ban of general use of glyphosate on city property, develop greater tolerance for weeds growing on city property because they will grow. So just making that point, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Councilmember Cook.
Yeah, I have a question about the non-glyphosate. What chemical names are those?
I know the one that our main park landscape contractor uses is called Avenger. And so if people are saying, well, I see dead weeds around the parks, didn't you ban use of glyphosate on the parks? And so that's a non-glyphosate based herbicide. It just kills what's growing above the surface. So those weeds will grow back and need subsequent treatment to keep them under control. And so that's just one I know of.
But that's not Omni approved. That's
I
not
don't know.
organic.
I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
I don't know if it's organic, but it's not glyphosate based.
Do you know how much we use of Avenger?
No.
Could I get a report on that?
Sure.
I have a question. So we received a maybe you can clarify this. We received a email from a member of the public which called out the requirement that when we apply pesticides and other hazardous materials that the city keep a log of when and where they're applied. And then when we had the last meeting, the staff asked for additional time to be able to report to us. So can you just briefly explain what are the current obligations with regard to tracking the use of chemicals in the city, and does that apply here? Just curious.
Yes, it does apply. The city has 2 licensed pesticide applicators, and we also contract with vendors who also have licensed pesticide applicators. They are required to keep track of what pesticides they're using, including herbicides, where they use them, how much they use, and report that to the Sonoma County Agricultural Commissioner. And so the report I gave of less than 1 gallon in 2018, that's adding up the quantities that our staff and our contractors used in 2018.
So at our last meeting, when the additional time was needed to be able to report back, can you just explain why additional time was needed if the data is regularly kept? There was a question that was emailed to us about that.
Well, from my notes from our last meeting, we wanted time to think more about other options and other ways we could control the weeds, and come back and present on that. And as we did that and met and thought about, okay, what specific locations are there where we have used glyphosate, even though we've tried to really narrow it down, where have we continued to use it, and what other options do we have in those locations. So we didn't come back. We thought we might come back to council and say, well, these particular spots we think we should be allowed to continue to use glyphosate. And as we thought about each particular location, we concluded we can find other ways to do it. So this gave us time to do that. And then it got down to particular species of plant material that are a concern.
Thank you. Any other questions? Vice Mayor Harvey.
So the reporting that you do, it's more about total amount used and not specific location where it's used. Is that correct?
I'm sorry. The reports to the Ag Commissioner are categorized with a number system. We put this much in type 14. So they can compile the numbers, and then they probably have to report to the state of how much of this was applied for what conditions in Sonoma County. So it's like around structures and that kind of thing in terms of, it's not,
It's
whatever,
not like on the
whatever.
corner of First
No.
Street East and whatever. Okay. So I think that was part of it. We had asked for specific locations. And I think this is kind of to David's point, maybe, and David knows a lot more about this than I do, but is there a way that we could do a broader ban of all synthetic herbicides and only go with organic? Is that something that you think that Public Works could handle as well? Because what I've heard from people that are involved in this and in the community is there's a fear that we're going to get rid of glyphosate-based herbicides and then switch to another synthetic that is as bad or worse. And so that's not something I'd like to see the city do. I wouldn't like to see us take a step back on this. If we're going to make this sort of a decision, then we should be moving forward and removing harmful chemicals. And so is that something that could be possible?
Of course, we follow council direction, but I have had, just so you know, I've had those same conversations with the Public Works staff. We're not going to stop using glyphosate and use something that is considered more toxic in our environment. That's not what we're hearing from the council. That would not be the right thing for us to do as staff. But if you would like us to come back with a report on using only organic products, that's not what we were asked to report on, but we could come back with a different item specific to that.
Yeah, I live, one of my roommates is in the viticultural field, and they do all organic farming, and so she's told me that Weed Slayer is a really good one. I don't know anything about it enough to talk directly about it, but apparently that's a really good product that they've had a lot of success with. Yeah, they're all really tough names, even though they're like organic. They're like a Street Fighter type of name, so, yeah.
Yeah, when I did talk to folks from other jurisdictions who are dealing with a complete ban on use of all synthetic herbicides, and they are all organic. They're all kinds of interesting names, and the challenge for the staff was if the community expected them to keep the weeds controlled to the same level that they had before, they were constantly out applying because the weed grows, it gets killed above ground. It grows. It has to get killed again and again and again and again, and it's a struggle for the staff, the folks I talk to. But if people don't mind the weeds growing there, it's not a struggle.
Councilmember Cook?
I was going to add this as a comment, but since Vice Mayor Harvey had brought it up. So do government agencies, do you have to do a site-specific, because what you were just talking to the Vice Mayor about is a pesticide use report that you're sending off to the Department of Agriculture. But when anybody applies a chemical, within 24 hours, you're supposed to state the place, time, active ingredient. Is that only for private business, or is that for government agencies also?
We do keep track of it, so we do know where we had applied the glyphosate in 2018. The report that our staff keeps, we know exactly where that was applied. We don't submit that level of detail to the Ag Commissioner. Sorry if I wasn't clear about that.
And where is that reporting displayed at?
I know that Terry Melberg, our park supervisor, who is a licensed pesticide applicator, keeps those records. I don't know that they're posted anywhere. I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other council questions?
Well,
Councilmember Agrimonti.
yeah, thank you. It's interesting. I think you offered that if we were going to do this, you had to look at the integrated pest management. Obviously, again, it looks like a lot of things have to change in there. Am I right? Because of that, I mean, everything says unless it's it's the type of plants that cannot be controlled, and they require repeat applications. There's just so much that takes you right back to that chemical, and it's not stated in here, but it's saying that we can't really address certain types of plants. I think you said that in the end, the poison oak and all and that. So what else? I guess what I'm asking is, it looks that a lot has to be done to this program to be able to change what we normally do.
I'm not seeing exactly what you're seeing, I guess, in the program, because we would just amend this. This is still the one from 2014. We would amend it to say that the use of glyphosate, which is on page 2 of this table, so that is banned, except for these certain invasive species.
In other words, you'd still have to use glyphosate for those
It would
species.
be an option for us to use it to control poison oak and to keep infestations of particularly ivy and blackberry bushes from returning in full force as they tend to do.
It's interesting. My husband was certified by PAPA. I don't forget the acronym, what that stands for. But he was just saying, well, what else is there? I agree that we need to do away with this, but I don't know. It would be nice if we could find something that wasn't as damaging, or to get rid of some invasive type of plants. But I don't know.
I have a question. Well, I think two things. One, can we get a report back on how what specifically the city intends to do to replace the use of glyphosate, so we know what we are doing instead specifically? And then two, the city of Napa just enacted a complete ban, and do you know, did that ban include a carve out for those specific plants, or was it just total?
I think my understanding is in Napa it was a total ban. I'm not sure if Napa has wildland parks like Sonoma does. I haven't talked to anyone from Napa. So I don't know if they have the same conditions and areas that we have. And even the plants that I just mentioned, it really varies from time to time what we're encountering out in the field and what tools our staff has to deal with the situations that we are encountering. So I can't come back and give a bunch of examples of what's out there right now. What I can tell you is what we've looked at, that there's there's areas where we think we could hire a contractor. It will take some budget, but we can hire a contractor to come through with hand tools and clear vegetation to allow, these are areas that I think our operations manager mentioned in our conversation in December, that there are some waterways that tend to get heavily overgrown with vegetation, and in the past, when we haven't done anything to manage that vegetation, the water backs up and floods city streets. And so we have had a program to have a vendor who's licensed to apply an aquatic approved herbicide, glyphosate-based herbicide in some drainage ways, and we're stopping that. We're talking to a vendor, getting estimates for cost, putting it in the budget, and also planning to do the environmental clearance that's needed to do the vegetation clearing in those waterways. And this is a result of you talking to staff and asking us to think about how we can do things differently. So we're taking that seriously and doing all the steps to really, not use it. But meanwhile, I hear from the staff there's poison oak growing along trails that the city and volunteers maintain, and sometimes it's very hard to keep the area safe for our folks that are, community members that are out enjoying.
And then my other question is, when you said before that you had spoken to people in other areas that had this ban, what cities did you talk to?
I have to check my notes. Before the December 17th meeting, I talked to quite a few folks and looked at the reports from Irvine. I think I cited some of those numbers during our conversation before, but I have extensive notes from the folks that I talked to back in December.
Was it anybody in Sonoma County?
I know Windsor. I was told today that Windsor.
I talked to Petaluma. I talked to Novato for sure, because they'd been dealing with it for a while. Oh yeah, I have a whole table of folks I talked to. I talked to the city of Concord. The town of Fort Jones didn't respond to my inquiry, although they have a ban. I talked to city of Pittsburgh, city of Santa Cruz, city of West Covina, but they're curious about that, and the Windsor. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay. I just wanted to say, I think council, depending on your action night, whether you're doing a full ban or kind of doing a full ban with a kind of maybe a partial carve out here. Again, I think as this Public Works Director has said, what we'll need to do is come back and update the integrated pest management plan. And with that, if part of your action tonight is to say that you don't want any other herbicide used in the interim until something comes back, and we can then potentially determine what other product other than glyphosate might be used, that could be part of the motion. And then, we would continue to have conversations about what is whether, again, a non-synthetic, an organic, and talk to a few of the other agencies to see if there's anything else. Again, I think even that would be limited, because our goal, I think, as Public Works staff has tried to do, is to look at how we're going to use more kind of handwork versus spraying, period. Because I think just even the active staff spraying will cause questions of what are you spraying, et cetera, and concerns the public might have. So just wanted to make sure you have that ability to provide the clarity in the interim before we come back to you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Harvey.
So can you talk a little bit about why the use of glyphosate is important, especially as it regards to poison oak and blackberry bushes? What is the fear? Is there danger being created for public works staff? Is there a higher risk there? Is it just a more work issue? And how specifically is it being used? Are you just spraying the whole plant and it's dying? Are you cutting parts of the plant away and then adding glyphosate? How does it work?
And until recently, we didn't have a ban on the use of glyphosate. So how we've used it in the past would be different from how we're talking about using it for very, very limited spot treatments potentially in the future. So you've probably had poison oak before. And
I have.
I
do a lot of hiking. I think I might not be reactive to it.
Well,
but I'm not testing that theory. I've
had staff from a prior agency have to take a week off work because of exposure to poison oak and the reaction that some people get with just incredible itching of their skin. And if you're really into it, you can get it all over. And if you have time for a little side story, my mom grew up in Massachusetts where they have poison ivy, but not poison oak. And poison oak can be quite lovely certain times of the year with nice color and all that. So my dad was highly affected by poison oak. So they were newly married. He came home one day and she had this lovely bouquet on the table that was poison oak, and he's like, "Oh, she's trying to kill me." But anyways, I've had plenty of painful days of poison oak sores, itching and scratching and oozing, and so it can really have a big impact on one's life and cause workers to take time off and all that. So exposing our city staff to that, we'd prefer other options, and we don't want to kill all the poison oak. It's just the part that's growing where you can't go hiking without it brushing your legs and arms, and then you break out in a rash. We just need to keep it back from the trail. And we have very environmentally conscious people maintaining the trails, and they call public works staff and ask us to help them apply some, properly approved and all that herbicide to help control the poison oak. So we have responded to those requests in the past. And so we'd like to be able to minimize it, but still be able to work with the folks out there to control the poison oak. Some of the other ones, just to elaborate on that, star thistle tends to spread and take out all the other native plants that would be there. So sometimes, again, environmentally conscious folks want to be able to have a very limited targeted application of glyphosate to knock that back and allow other plants to come back in. And that's that. I hear more from the plant ecologist restoration folks, I think, as far as the need to control star thistle. The blackberry and ivy are ones that can get out of our control, out of sight. And so we're not out looking for this. Just sometimes we get a call from the public or a drainage issue or something where there's sometimes ivy is growing up and it's really heavy, and if it breaks loose, it can fall and hurt people. But we would want to bring that down, manual methods, bring it down to where there's just stumps. And then to keep it from taking back off and growing, if we had this as a tool in our toolbox to just do a limited application, it would help stop it then and keep it from becoming another big problem that then we'd have to tear back down. So that's the feedback I've gotten from my staff.
No other questions? I will open it up for public comment. If you'd like to make a comment on this item, please give us your name and your address before you speak.
My name is Mike Zakowski, 1777 West Watmall Road. I would like to motion for a full ban in the city of Sonoma. I'm not sure, there is a pesticide map. It's the California Environmental Health Tracking Program, where you can click on that and you can find your specific location where you live, and you can see the chemicals that are listed, because it's all tracked by the state or the county. So in my area, I know exactly where I live, as I've lived next to many vineyards, and I currently have cancer. We have the second highest cancer rates in the state, Napa being the number one, and our agriculture is based around grapes. My ex-partner has passed from cancer. My dog has seizures now. I think we should ban it in the whole city. My friend and I are trying to get it on the ballot for the either April or next November in the county, to get it banned in the county. We need to set a precedent for the rest of the country. It's ridiculous that and you talked of waterways. I mean, that's the worst thing. Are we even testing our water with glyphosate in our water?
That's why we're
We
not
can
gonna use-
answer the questions at the end of
I'm
public
just
comment.
saying, okay.
Thanks.
Anyways, I'm just saying in general, are we even testing our water? What levels are in our waters in our current public works? We really need to set for the rest of the country, we need to set a precedent on this. I've seen that Roundup is taken out of Friedman's, but they've replaced it with another product called Cleanup, which has 9% less glyphosate in there. And there's going to be shapeshifters. They're going to continue to constantly change and manipulate and bring in a new product. That's just the way they do it. So I think an all-out ban for sure in the city, and I'm going for the county in general because I live here and I want to live here. Unfortunately, it's a poison valley right now, in my opinion. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment, and I'm sorry to hear you're sick.
David Eicher, Loma Court. Jury agrees weed killer likely cause man's cancer. Jury awards $80 million Monsanto case. It's Edward Hardeman, 70. He's from Forestville. He sprayed Roundup on his property for 26 years, and he has cancer. And there's many more lawsuits that are pending in the courts. So I did get, through a Public Records Request Act, a monthly summary pesticide report that the IPM manager is supposed to put together. And in there, I'm surprised if you didn't get this. I know you've been asking for this information. And of course, one of the things that's missing is the target. You're supposed to put the target of what the pest or you're trying to get rid of, whether it's poison ivy or if you're spraying pesticides, what type of bug. And it's got commodity site code on so for the sites, and the sites are pretty broad. Depot Park, Cater Park, MacArthur Park, and then Mountain Cemetery / Overlook Trail. So I'm hiking up the Overlook Trail. That means I am then have Roundup on my shoes that I bring back down. I track back into my house. First time I really thought about that was tonight. And also disturbed me in the past was he said, you can't mow against the fence line, so you spray Roundup. Well, I have a weed whacker, works great along fence line. And I'm thinking, what's on the other side of that fence? It's a home. It could be a home. You could have pets. You could have a 2-year-old playing out there. And, the Roundup, it drifts. When you spray it, it doesn't just stay exactly where you put it, it drifts because they've done tests and found that even in some organic foods, there have found the glyphosate in them. That means it's drifted from an area where it was sprayed onto the other one. And it's also linked to other, besides cancers, other problems. And there's still more investigation that's needed on this, but digestive problems, miscarriage, and possibly autism as well. And so I'd like to see a complete ban on it. There's just too many unknowns to further. You're talking about someone that might have to take a week off of work because you have poison oak. Unless you're strongly allergic, that's not deadly. Glyphosate has been found to be deadly, so please ban that. And I do have one question: is who is the IPM coordinator? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to comment?
Yes, my name's Carol Harbard. I'm from 307 Meadowwood Lane, and I also request a complete ban based on my knowledge and research and being a nurse, holistic nurse healer, by someone who is unable to eat wheat and gluten in this country. In other countries, I am able to, where they don't have this pesticide. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? So I think we had 2 questions from the public. One was with regard to testing of our waters, our waterway. How is that done? What's done? And the second one is who is our IPM coordinator? IMP. Sorry.
Our integrated pest management coordinator is Terry Melberg, our park supervisor, and he's the one that provided that report. As far as testing our water in our waterways, there is some testing that's done under our stormwater discharge permit. I do not think that glyphosate is on the list of chemicals to be tested under the permit.
Thank you. Okay. Well, at this point, I will take it back to the council for comments. Councilmember Hundley.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to thank Public Works for the brainstorming you guys have been doing since our last meeting, because it would have been easy for us to just go with a full ban while quietly switching to other synthetic chemicals that would just do the same thing, which I know we were a little bit disturbed from hearing that other cities had done that, but I first support a full ban tonight, and I do find it interesting that there's some circumstances where it's, I think a lot of people think it's, more visually, the need is to have pesticides and herbicides, but, things like keeping the waterways clear, it's important to, well, all kinds of things. And same thing with keeping our hiking trails safe that we love. And it would be a lot easier if we didn't have all of these invasive species that we're constantly fighting back. But recognizing that that is also something really important. I know that moving away from glyphosate completely is going to be more expensive to do both of those things, but I think it's a worthwhile investment for our community, and it seems daily we hear worse and worse things about glyphosate, so I just think we have to bite the bullet and figure something else out. And I did look up Avenger. It's non-synthetic, made out of citrus oil and castor oil. So I think that because a lot of people are becoming more educated about the harms of glyphosate, that there will be more products developed that are non-synthetic. And I that's where I would like to end up, is in a place where we are only relying on organic materials and hand labor. But I want to start with this, and then I guess we'll figure out what's next on our list and keep moving forward. But I appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you, Councilmember Cook.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do believe that using 1 gallon of Roundup is 128 ounces too much. So I will be supporting a total ban. I do understand a lot about the invasive and the different species that we're trying to target, but ticks are bad. But does that mean that we spray the whole overlook trail because there might be a tick there? So what I would like to see is a total ban tonight, and then the council come back and make sure that anything that we are using, we use the word pesticide is the big category, but it's a herbicide, there's fungicides, there's other things that are being used in the valley. I'd really like this council to come back and make sure that anything that we are using in the city of Sonoma on our public grounds would be OMRI approved, and that would mean that we were totally certified organic, and I think it would be great for the city of Sonoma to put that, and that way we would be an example to others. So I'll be supporting a total ban tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Agrimonti?
So, I used to serve on the North Bay Watershed Association, and so I'm sure they would have information with respect to how it affects streams and other bodies of water within the county. So I think that might be a place to look at. I saw Avenger. Did I? No, I saw. What was that other product the gentleman mentioned? I did see that. Clean Up, I think it was, at Friedman's. And I said, wow, look at that. And my husband said, just look at that little fine print. And it still says the same product. The only thing is they try to fool you by some of these, it's like if you want a gentle destruction, they have a less percentage of this chemical. But if you want to whack it to death at that moment, then it's the higher percentage. So it's a marketing thing, I think, a tool that they're using as well. But for example, I would love to see I'd love to get my husband's opinion on Avenger, but I'm sure he would say that's probably true, but you have to apply it again and again and again and again. I'm not justifying using the other product, but I'm just saying this is big. I support banning this product, but I'm just saying it's probably not, it's not going to affect an awful lot, but at least it's a start. I think that's what we should be happy about.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yeah, I'll also be supporting a full ban. That seems to be where we're all going. I have some concerns for Public Works and the amount of work that this is going to take, and I trust you guys to find solutions to this. I think this is, I understand that you're bearing the brunt of it, but hopefully this is for the benefit of your employees in the long run. I considered a lot about the poison oak issue, and I think that I still have concerns about removing this tool completely, but hearing that it's primarily done along the hiking trail where people are walking it's kind of concerning to me for sure. We have major issues with drift throughout this county. The primary source of glyphosate is not going to be the city's use. It's going to be the use in the vineyards. That's where you're seeing a massive amount in grows that are not being used, not being treated organically, and everybody deals with it. I spoke to people that are in the cannabis business, and they deal with drift onto their crops and destroys that as well. So it's a major problem through this valley that we need to start contending with. And I agree with the gentleman who spoke earlier that we should be a leader. So I will be supporting this tonight as well.
Thank you. I think I originally asked to add this to the agenda at the end of last year at our agenda setting meeting, and I'm really pleased with tonight's progress, and I also support a full ban. I think that this is the opening of a conversation probably about what are the best practices and what can be done to make sure that we have the healthiest community possible. I think that's the goal of all of us, Public Works and the City Council, and so I think probably we should have a better understanding of what's being applied and what are the alternatives. And given that this is bans are happening more and more frequently, I think that there will probably, we will have the opportunity to try out different things and figure out what works best as other cities do it and learn from each other. And so hopefully over time we'll figure out what are the most efficient and cost-effective ways to not use these chemicals. And I don't think this is a direct parallel, but obviously, there have been prior chemicals that were hyper effective that had huge environmental consequences, and I'm thinking of DDT, and then we couldn't use it anymore because it was destroying the environment. So I think there is a history of applying these toxic chemicals and then finding out that, that it just can't be done. And so whatever the things are that have to be done instead of applying toxic chemicals into our environment, that's what we have to do because we can't continue to do it because it makes everybody sick. So with that, I will entertain a motion. If somebody wants to make one.
Okay. I move for the city of Sonoma to ban the use of glyphosate on all city property and direct Public Works to no longer use the chemical. Does that work?
Second.
I just want to clarify, this is city property includes public works and contractors.
Yes.
And just maybe also and directing staff to amend the integrated pest management policy. So we will pull the glyphosate out of that. Is that part of your
also
motion as well?
direct staff to amend the the integrated pest management policy and pull glyphosate as a option to be used.
Do we need a new second?
Second.
Can we get a roll call? Second.
Councilmember Hundley,
Yes.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Okay. And now on to item 6.4, which is a consideration, discussion, and possible direction on financial oversight and policies, council financial fiduciary responsibilities, and monthly reporting requirements. And I will turn that over to the city manager and the city attorney and the finance director, assistant city manager.
Great. Mayor Harrington, members of the council, members of the community. So at the February 4th quarterly agenda meeting, Mayor Harrington raised a question and wanted to talk about some of the city's financial requirements. There was discussion about check signing and monthly financial reports and requested that the city attorney provide kind of an overview of the city council's financial fiduciary responsibility. So the staff report is in response to that. And I'll go through the presentation and then allow the city attorney to kind of go through his legal analysis at the end. City council members definitely have a fiduciary responsibility and to provide that fiscal stewardship over taxpayer resources. I will say a city's financial responsibilities are complicated. There's federal requirements, there's state requirements, there are local ordinances, and staff, as we have been working on looking at a variety of the city's policies and practices, have been reviewing a whole variety of documents over the past 3 or 4 months. And with that, what's surprising is there's not one comprehensive list that exists. There's definitely there are a few required policies, and then there's some best practices. So the Muni Code does lay out that the city manager and lays out responsibilities for the city manager and our designee, and then in our structure, the assistant city manager, administrative services director oversees finance. And so one of the items within the Muni Code does talk about a monthly report, which was the question raised by Mayor Harrington. And it says that the finance director shall prepare and present to the city council a monthly financial summary statement of receipts and disbursements by departments and funds, including opening, closing fund balances in the treasury. So let me tell you a little bit about kind of where we've been, and we have a sample of a monthly report and then some options for council to give us direction on how you want us to move forward. So the past practice for the last 10 years is the city has not done a monthly report that we can see that has ever been prepared, though again, it is a legal requirement of the Muni Code. The city's past practice has been to do a mid-year budget report. Typically would happen sometime in probably February, March, April timeline. And
I'm sorry. Can we just shut that door because people are talking in the room outside? Sorry.
So, thank you. As Suitcase, our assistant city manager, and I've talked to different colleagues and looked at different practices, there are different practices in terms of reporting that occurs. So some larger cities do have kind of monthly reports, so it does exist. The medium-sized cities I've worked for, 50 to 90, would typically that I've seen have typically done quarterly, because cities, both revenues are not, they come in different times, and so there's not a flow, like our property tax we get in December and April. So a monthly report, it looks like your property tax is way off. It's actually not, we just only get it 2 times a year. And that is noted in the monthly report that you got, so some of those lags, so the public understands that. So smaller cities like Sonoma have traditionally done kind of this mid-year budget updates, and that's what Sebastopol and Cotati have done. And in terms of the monthly report that is attached in your staff report, as a sample, it is a real monthly report, but as a sample of if you wanted something provided, what it could look like. There are 3 caveats based on what the Muni Code says and what we can deliver at this point. So one, there is the way it's broken down in expenses now. It's just broken down by like salaries, supplies. We did break out the fire contract and the police contract because those are large portions. But in terms of by departments like city attorney, public works, our financial software is not laid out in that way to make that easy to do at this point. So until we can kind of get some of those things built, that's not something, though it talks about by department, that would take additional time to break out and do. The report also focuses on the city's general fund. This is not all the 52 separate funds that exist. And fund balances also is talked about in the Muni Code. And again, fund balances they don't change monthly, they change annually when you're looking at your overall fund balance at the end of the year. And so while we could add to kind of what the fund balance was for the end of the year, it's not going to change monthly. So some options for you all to consider and give us direction on is, one, to provide a monthly report similar to what's shown in attachment B for the general fund. We also could potentially provide something like this for the water fund, which is really the other kind of key piece of the city's operation, if that's something the council is interested in. Your other option could be to not do a monthly report and just do what's been done historically, which is a mid-year budget report, and return with an ordinance update to clarify and change that. The other option is to do quarterly, not do monthly, but quarterly of a similar nature, and again, change the ordinance. Staff's recommendation would be to do the quarterly piece, but again, it's a pleasure of the council, and maybe there's something we haven't thought of, so wait to hear from you. The other item that was talked about was check signing. And so this was another concern and question raised by Mayor Harrington. And the government code and resolution 26/2016 that's been reviewed by been approved by the council basically has currently 5 folks that can sign checks. And I'll come back to that in just a minute. I think one thing that's important to understand is when we're talking about check signing, there is a separation of duties. So the people that create the checks cannot sign the checks. And so currently the way this works, for example, a first line supervisor would get an invoice, they would review that invoice as had the work been done, they would code that invoice, they would sign it typically is the way it would work. It then goes to a department head. So a department head, in this case, maybe Colleen, our Public Works Director, would be reviewing it. She would check it, sign it, and then it comes over to finance. When it gets to finance, an accounting technician looks at the invoice, looks at the coding, makes sure it's accurate, makes sure there's budget in that line item, and then it gets put into the system. Once it's put into the system, then the Deputy Finance Director reviews it all again for those same things, and then pushes kind of the system to create the checks. At that point, the checks leave finance and they come over to kind of City Hall. And then, again, the way what has occurred historically is that there are 5 positions that can sign the checks. One of the positions that's listed in the resolution has not signed the checks and should not be authorized to sign the check. This resolution was done in 2016. It lists the finance director. So I've not authorized the finance director, and again, we changed our organization structure, but so our assistant city manager or the deputy finance director, neither of them are authorized to sign checks. But the resolution does list the name. So that is something that should be changed. They should not have been on that resolution initially, and they have not signed checks. So then the check signing, when the checks come over, there are 3 people, including the mayor, that can sign checks. Myself as the city manager, Rebecca is our city clerk, and the administrative services manager who works on our human resources piece, Kathy Lanning. And then the mayor. The practice has been that there's 2 signatures on the check, a staff member has signed the check, and then the mayor's signature has been stamped on the check. The mayor has not done the review. So, and when we've talked with, and I'll let Sue can add a little bit to this, but we have talked with the auditor, and we've reviewed and talked to other cities about kind of this practice. So a couple things, rarely is there an elected official who is signing checks. Now, I will say that the stamping is something I think that has been done for quite some time. And in terms of the authorization, what we're doing now, because Mayor Harrington didn't want things to be stamped. So either myself, there's two staff members who are signing all the checks. And that's fine within the resolution. It just says 2 of these people can sign those checks. So we are within the council policy authority. So one thing that's interesting is I think since this section of the code was written, the technology in some of this has changed. So one, city financial systems, and talking to like Roanoke Park and a couple of the other cities, there's no one physically signing checks, period. They get stamped through their financial system, spewed out and done. And 2, from talking to the auditor, banks are not checking signatures like they used to in this day of automation. So that is kind of not, it's just the practice has kind of changed. So I think at this point, what I'm recommending to council is 2 things. One, we should come back with a resolution to remove the finance director from signing checks, because that should not have been done in 2016. Number 2, I think another piece to think about, and I would like to, when we have a new auditor who's doing kind of a very thorough review of our practices, there may be a time when a stamp could be helpful. So let's pretend we're a small organization, right? Let's pretend two people are on vacation, or it's an emergency situation or something. But we could have a limited number of people available to actually sign checks. But someone could send me the check register electronically. I could review it. I could go through everything, and I could say, yes, I'm fine. Use my stamp on those checks because I have reviewed it. So there is a way to potentially not just use a stamp, but to make sure that when the stamp is used, it has been reviewed. So at this point, they all are being signed by two people, but that's kind of another decision point and conversation you all can have. Just going through a few other items within the staff report, we've also laid out some of the recent financial accomplishments that, I think council should feel proud of, the work that has been done, from putting kind of some actuals within our budget document, which hadn't been done in about 7 years, to the amazing work that our Public Works team did to build a 5-year capital budget. The council sent through 5, maybe 6 public sessions on the water rate study. You dove in deep to those water rates. We cleaned up some issues related to those water rates. We have a brand new auditor selected. We did our city's first cost allocation plan. We've updated the reserve policy. We put a TOT ballot initiative on that was approved by 80% of the voters. So there's been a lot of good work done in conjunction and in team on the financial accomplishments. We still have some challenges because as a small city, historically there's been quite a bit of turnover, and there are some things that in terms of both the practices and systems that still need to be reviewed and cleaned up. And there's also been a challenge with the city put in new financial software in place in 13-14, and unfortunately it was started, and then there was a gap of at least 6-7 months before the new person was hired. And so the whole financial system, frankly, just the full implementation wasn't done. So like we have the folks from Springbrook, they're out here this week for an entire week doing some training with staff, and we're looking at are there some other ways we can improve the system. But there are things within that system that just weren't initially set up right, which makes it more cumbersome from staff. We do have a new auditor, as I mentioned, and that auditor is doing a comprehensive review, and there's more detail about that in the staff report. I think another challenge for staff is just that, when we have a change, and in the last 18 months, of the 4 folks we have in finance, all of them are brand new. So we had some folks that worked for the city for 10, 15, 30 years that retired or moved on to new opportunities, and those transitions have brought us some fresh perspective and experience, but there's also a lot of legwork and groundwork and teaching systems. So we're getting caught up. And then, as I mentioned, there's a lot of policy work and systems to put in place. So the one other item that I think, as we thought about kind of council's role and how council could work with staff more closely, one item is we have an audit committee. A lot of cities have a standing audit committee. A lot of cities, frankly, have a standing finance committee. So the same group of same 2 council members are not only reviewing the audit before it comes back to the full council, but they're also reviewing policies, or if there's questions of interpretation or those types of things. And so we would really recommend that the council maybe take that audit committee and we revise it and update it to be a true finance committee. And I think currently the folks on that committee, and I just double checked that, are Vice Mayor Harvey's on the audit committee and Councilmember Agrimonti. So those are, I guess I just want to say to the council, I appreciate all the work that you have worked with us on in the last 18 months since Sue's arrival and the last 2 years since mine. And I want to and I think we've made good progress. I think there's a lot of work for us to continue to do. And with that, I'll turn it to your city attorney to talk about some of the legal fiduciary.
As my attachment to the staff report indicates, the City Council does have a fiduciary duty in dealing with the city's financial condition. It's a 2-part obligation to act with loyalty towards the city and the city's best interests, and also to act with due care. The city's council's obligation to avoid self-dealing or exercise the duty of loyalty is now pretty much memorialized and codified in statutes, the conflict of interest rules that we've been dealing with every week, every month of our lives. The FPPC regulations, how close is your property to a particular project. Those kinds of statutory provisions have codified the self-dealing provisions that are embraced within the fiduciary duty. On the other hand, the duty of care to act in good conscience and with a requisite level of diligence, the courts have not been very helpful in explaining what that means, and nor are there extensive statutes that outline what that duty means. It certainly does not mean, in my view, that you need to bring your own CPA to every budget hearing, or every time you see a bill that's being paid or a contract awarded, you don't need to bring your own auditor to drill down into the details of the particular contract in question, make sure there's sufficient funds and the funds to pay for the contract. There's no obligation on the council's part to vet every check to make sure the checks are in the appropriate amount, if there are funds available to cover the check, and the vendor who's getting the payment has provided services that are reasonably estimated to be the cost of the check involved. That kind of detail, that kind of duty is to be discharged by your staff, by the competent people that have been retained by you and the city manager and she in the finance department. I know that there was some expression of concern about exposure on the council's part to a deal gone bad. And
I just want to clarify. The question was, if there is a law that we are not complying with, what is the consequence for this? It's not a deal gone bad. There are rules we are not following that are in the law. Then what? That's the question.
The rules that I believe we are not complying with are there's two provisions of the municipal code which have been cited to already. An annual summary report, our muni code requires to be presented to the council, summarizing the disbursements and the income along with the fund balances. That is also supposed to have been provided on a monthly basis. I'm now learning that that monthly report is something that has not been provided for many years. Is there liability on the part of the city council for these reports not being presented to the council by staff? I believe there is not. The council is not obligated to provide those reports because the municipal code specifically states it's the finance director's duty to provide those reports. So what can the council do in response to the lack of these reports? You can certainly work with your city manager and make sure that there are sufficient funds and sufficient staff that allow these reports to be presented on a monthly basis. City Manager Capriola in her report is suggesting that these reports not be submitted every month but quarterly. Those two requirements in our municipal code are not mandated by state law. Those are self-imposed by the city itself. So they can change. There are other annual reports that the state law, as I mentioned in my staff report, are required to be filed, for example, with the state controller's office. And those reports are required to be filed within 7 months after the end of the city's fiscal year. To my knowledge, those reports have been prepared and have been filed. If the council directs the city manager to submit these monthly reports consistent with the city's own municipal code, and you provide a sufficient budget to pay the appropriate number of staff people, make sure that happens, and they still aren't provided to you, then you need to have a serious talk with your city manager to make sure that that does happen. I did not research the issue of whether the council, for example, has some sort of standing to sue your city manager or sue your finance director to compel these reports to be supplied. If that is where the council were to be going, the relationship between those individuals and the council is already fairly broken. So obviously the first step would be to see if you can work with your staff. If you think these reports are important and need to continue on a monthly basis, then you need to figure out a way to have that happen and provide a sufficient backup and staff to make that happen. I did interpret the question a little bit differently than you've just articulated, Mayor Harrington, as you know.
Yes. But I actually do have another question. I'll wait till you're done.
I was concerned mainly about what would happen if the council itself made some bad financial decisions. Do you each expose yourself to personal liability for those bad decisions? And I think my report made it pretty clear that most of those decisions that you would be making are discretionary. And in those instances, discretionary immunity would protect you. There's some couple of really good examples. The worst kind of financial situation a city could find itself in, which is often the case with private parties too, is bankruptcy. Both Stockton and Vallejo, as you know, filed for bankruptcy. Vallejo filed bankruptcy largely because over a period of time, the collective bargaining negotiations led the various councils and council members to provide too rich a package of benefits that eventually could not be paid for by the city. And that was the precipitating cause of the bankruptcy. But individual council members who had made those decisions along the way were nowhere near being exposed to liability. They were not required to somehow pay the city's lawyers' fees or the costs incurred in processing the bankruptcy. In Stockton, it filed bankruptcy because the city, right before the recession in 2007, 8, 9, floated a large amount of bonds to pay for a large downtown project, a stadium and a new city hall, hoping that the stadium would generate revenue to pay the bonds back. It didn't happen. The city council members there were not exposed to liability. That was a very discretionary kind of act. There was no requirement that it issue the bonds or create this project for a downtown renaissance, which failed. So by and large, council members are, in my view, immune from discretionary financial decision making.
Yeah, different question, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, though.
Sure.
I have questions. I'm gonna take the discretion to go first. My first question is, Jeff, with regard to your memo, it does say, that Government Code 37-2008 provides payroll warrants or checks need not be audited by the legislative body prior to payment. Payrolls shall be presented to the legislative body for ratification and approval at the first meeting after delivery of the payroll warrants or checks. And that's a state law, and I looked at the Healdsburg City Council, what they do, and they actually have, what they have on their regular agenda is this document. I'm sorry, I don't have copies, but I can pass it around. It's a approval of disbursement report for withdrawals during the month of December. Every month they have a check register, like a QuickBooks. They just put it on so like every member of the public can see what checks were written. And then it says on here, background, state law requires that the city council approve the city's monthly disbursement activity. So with regard to the suggestion that we can just change our municipal code and that we don't have monthly reporting requirements, I'm wondering if that's correct.
It is. If you look at the last paragraph of that section 37208, it says, notwithstanding subdivision A, which is the section that talks about monthly ratification of payroll checks, it says, notwithstanding that section, budgeted payrolls and demands paid by warrants or checks may be presented to the legislative body for ratification approval in the form of an audited comprehensive annual financial report.
I guess I just am wondering, maybe we should check with Healdsburg, and I didn't have a time to ask them, but on their document it says that state law requires this, but they don't cite the code, so I'm wondering if there is a state law that requires that. But I think that this is a very good practice and easy for us to do. I can pass it around if you want to see it. Easy for us to do, this is the front page, I get the check register now as the mayor, it's produced, and then it could just be shared with the public and the council. So that's one question I had.
So let me answer a little bit. So my understanding is, and I don't know when, but there was some time where that check register, it used to be required. And then again, this was changed, and so now it is not a required. You can just do your comprehensive annual financial report. So again, some cities put on the disbursement or the check register on the agenda. You can do that. That's one option for the council. The other option is some cities put it on their website because, again, if it's posted, it's there. It's available to council, available to public, but it's not necessarily on the agenda every time. So there's different ways. And then there's actually a whole new world where there's frankly some very robust software systems that make a lot of this financial system even more transparent. We're a few years away from even being able to kind of think about those worlds, but some of that is where, kind of the world of financial transparency is moving for cities. So
I guess that also brings me back to Jeff's memo, because it says, Government Code 53891 through 53897 require the city finance director to file with the state controller and post on the city's website an annual report of all financial transactions of the city during the preceding fiscal year in a form and containing information specified in those code sections. Is that the annual audit, or what does that mean, Jeff?
Luckily, I had that discussion with Kathy this afternoon. I don't think it is the annual audit, but I
It
could
doesn't
be wrong
sound
about
like it
that.
is. So
and Sue can maybe elaborate. So the controller's report, this kind of interim report about your finances, that used to be, for some time, due the end of October. They actually changed the deadline now, it's due the end of January. Cities, if your audited financial report, because that's really kind of what they want, that's typically what's provided. And if you don't have that done, what you do is you provide them kind of your best draft. And then you send the final when it's ready. And that's the process that cities work and do. So, and that's what we have done. So that's the way, so there is the state controller's report, but and on our website is each of the city's audited financial reports for the last, I think, 7-8 years, are on the website.
I'm just confused. So the question was the report, which says all the financial transactions, which is what I was asking Jeff, if that is the audit, which I think he said no to. What is that? Did you say no, Jeff?
Well,
I'm just trying to figure it out.
I was trying to figure out too. Kathy and I were talking about it would be cool if our audited financial statement could be the controller's report. Just produce one document,
Right.
And it's used at least for two purposes. And
But
I got the
it's not.
sense that in practice,
So there's two different reports. There's the state controller's report, and they actually have a specific form that you go in and you fill out. It's really from your financial statements. And it did used to be due at the end of October, but very few cities had their audits done by the end of October. So they were submitting unaudited financials. You pretty much are aware of what your financials are by the end of October, or you should be. And so you would go in but every year you had to do an adjustment based on any of the audit adjustments that were done. So they changed that requirement till the end of January, because most audits should be done by the end of January. And so there also is the audited financial statements, which they're two separate reports.
So I guess the question is, do we post the financial transactions that are discussed in this government code 53891 on the website? And if we don't, shouldn't we start, since it's required by law?
We do post the audited financials on the website.
Right, that was the beginning of the discussion, which is that
Yes.
is not what this references.
Yeah, so, and again, this code here, is this government code, or is this? Yeah. So mostly
This is actually in the Muni Code.
so this is in the Muni code, and
This
so.
says government code 53891.
It's a different page.
I'm looking at page 14 of your document. Jeff,
Right.
it's
At
the
very
bottom.
At the bottom.
Government Code 53891, require the city finance director to file with the state controller and post to the city's website an annual report of, quote, all the financial transactions, unquote, of the city. This code section specifies financial penalties that may be assessed against the finance director for refusing to file or failing to file the report in a timely fashion. That's what I'm talking about.
That's referring to the state controller's report.
Right.
Right, so do we
Yes.
post that on our website?
You can't really post that on your website.
I'm just saying this, I don't know, but this
Right.
says it's supposed to be on the
So
website.
what would happen is that what would back up that report would be the audited financials, which would be this, it should have the same documentation that's in your state controller's report, except for any audit adjustments that had not yet been posted. So as far as, so we do submit our information to the state controller. Then once the audited financials are available, then we do post those on our website.
So I guess the question is to the city attorney, does that sound to you like that is what is asked for under the code section?
I don't know.
I don't know either. How will we find that out?
My experience has been that the state controller's report and that audited financials should be posted as soon as you have them.
Okay, but do we do
So-
that?
We do.
We have the state controller's report posted on our website?
You cannot post the state controllers, you would post your audited financials. So, and I'd have to read this really closely again, because I've never heard that you wouldn't put the state controller's report, because if you read it, you're not gonna understand it. It doesn't give you the financial picture. It's in a format that the state controller pulls the data from. So, but you would understand the audited financials, so.
Well,
I think, Mayor Harrington, one thing that again, we have a brand-new auditor who is very thorough. I would recommend that that we review this question with the auditor, and we then could bring back and clarify, again, this is what they do, and work with the subcommittee, and if there's changes or something else that needs to be done, then we would move forward and could apprise council of that.
okay, I have my last question, and I'm sorry, and thank you to the council for giving me this ability to ask these questions. So the last one is, it says, under Government Code 53908, the annual compensation of all city employees and officers is to be posted on the city's website. Do we do that?
Yes, we do. It's a link to the state, right, this is a thing that has also changed over time. You actually submit and put information in with the state controller, and it's listed there, and so we link to that website.
And where
it's
is that on our website?
It is, I would double check, it's either on our HR page or our finance page. Happy to send council the link.
Thanks. Okay, other questions? Thanks. Councilmember Cook?
Yeah, I just had a procedural question. Because of the Brown Act, sometimes council members aren't able to talk to each other, and it makes it a little hard. The procedure, in 2015, when I was mayor, just making sure it's the same as it was so I could understand most of this. When I was mayor, I was given a sheet of every check that was written, and I was giving a little stamp, which wasn't for the check, but on top of that, I would say these were okay. I'd put my initials. It was usually 4 or 5 pages long. And city staff always told me that I should come in almost every other day to the office, and they would put it right in the mayor's. Is that still the practice of the city of
Yeah,
Sonoma?
so, yes, and so that's where there's kind of two different things. There's the signing of the checks, and then there's the check register, which has historically been reviewed here by the mayor, and that's the check register that you're describing. You review it, and if there's questions, and mayors have had questions in the past, and then they either talk at this point, they talk with Sue, or would have talked with the past finance director, and then you are stamping that you've reviewed them.
And I guess I should look at my $30 paycheck, but does it, who signs the check? I haven't looked lately. Is it the mayor? Right now, is it the mayor?
So, no, right now, the checks recently have been signed by either myself and Kathy Lanning, or myself and Rebecca Barr.
Okay, thank you.
And our city, the state compensation website is shown it's on our HR page. I'll link it out to you.
And I don't know what was shown when you were the mayor, but when I saw what was called the check register, it had a name and a dollar amount, but it had no memo. So you couldn't tell what the check was for. It'd be like David Cook, $10,000, and then no description at all. But now the city has corrected that, and they do provide a check register with a memo.
Yeah, so there was Mayor Harrington is right, there was a little bit of information, but we have another report that comes out of the system that provides a little more detail, provides kind of a few more notes, and so that information is now being provided to the mayor.
So I guess this is for the attorney. Is there any problem with putting that on the website? That should be public knowledge. It has names and compensation back to these individuals. Would that be something that could be posted on the website?
I think so. I think there's been some cases that hold that the salaries paid to public employees is not considered.
Or I'm talking about even, contractors, vendors.
So,
That shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah,
the city of Healdsburg does it.
yeah, you can put,
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Take it out to the public. Any member of the public wish to comment on this item, please come forward now. Seeing none, I'll close public comment and public comment and bring it back to the council for comments.
As a former mayor, I think, I haven't seen the new register, but if it includes the purpose of the check, I'm happy about that. I don't know. I think what I've just reviewed from the city of Healdsburg, that's really nice to see. But I just saw something like 40-something items that added up to $2,000. I can't imagine anybody's interest. For me personally, I don't even know what line item it was, or what department, or where the expense was. I'm not interested in that. But if others feel on this city council that that's an interesting thing to review, I think it's interesting. I don't know. I just have no interest, but I do appreciate the mayor's ability to change that check register, because I think it's good to see where that trail of money is.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
So we're just talking about posting things on the website, posting the check information on the website potentially, and then either doing monthly or quarterly reporting. Okay. Cool.
And
correct, and then also, I think we'd like to have some feedback on the finance committee versus audit committee, if that's something council's interested in.
I was afraid you were going to say that.
Councilmember Cook?
I put my thinking down.
Yeah, I'm actually for the audit committee. I think right now it's Mayor Harrington and Vice Mayor Logan, Harvey.
It's Councilmember Agrimonti and Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yeah, it's you two. I do think that would be smart to have that, the financial committee. And also, because of the Brown Act, I think I like what Healdsburg does, because that gives a venue that we can look through that, and then we can discuss at a public meeting, what really happened here. If I have a question and I go to the mayor and I ask her, she'll say, well, I Brown acted with somebody else about this, and that's kind of when it probably gets into a little bit of legalities. So I would feel better and be more transparent that if we could do monthly reporting of the check register.
Great.
Could it be a link? I'm sorry. Could it be a link or something? Not necessarily. If somebody actually is interested in it.
So I have, which I'll share. I have 3 examples. The city of Healdsburg just does like what you would do from QuickBooks, and then I have the city of Napa. I'll pass this around. They do kind of like a summary one that sort of says where everything's at, a 2-pager, and then the city. They're all similar sizes, which is why I thought, it's interesting. And then the city of Orinda. They also have kind of a summary, and then they also do just like a QuickBooks type of deal. So these are 3 possible reports that I think are interesting to note. The thing I thought was, I was curious because I know there had been financial problems in the city, and I did not know exactly what they were. And I did some research, and I found the good old Sonoma Index Tribune from February 3rd, 1995, and it explains sort of why our code contains these provisions. I'm not going to bore you to death, but I do just want to note that it said that there was 100 adjustments were made during this this audit, and the result was the city realized it had only $105,000 in cash in the general fund instead of the $2.9 million it originally reported. So all of the rules, and you can go through these articles, that's when the city finance director position was created, that's when all of the council oversight was put into the code, was because we were more than $2 million short. That's what happened in 1995 at this council. And so I think that is the background of why this council is very involved, is that there was a huge error. And then if you look at the newspaper articles that follow that, it's all about budget cuts and no raises and financial austerity. And it actually, this whole mess, all these articles kind of explain the culture that has evolved here, which is to spend no money because we were millions of dollars off. And so I think it is in that context that our municipal code was written. I think it's helpful to know that history so that it's like, well, first of all, that can happen. And second of all, that's why we have these oversight. And I think a monthly report is really important, for that reason. And it's my daughter. One of my concerns is that if our paid professional staff, who are obviously much more savvy in these areas than we are making decisions, the data that we're requesting must be available to them. And if it isn't available to them, then that's very concerning that they're making decisions without having the ability to look at our financial position. So I would hope that our financial position can be looked at and regularly reviewed. And if that is true, it doesn't make sense to me that we cannot also just have some checks and balances to make sure that it's regularly reviewed. And then looking at similarly sized cities in the county of Sonoma, they have these simple practices like just attach a check register, and then at least we're, getting some reporting. So, Vice Mayor Harvey.
So are the things that we're asking about going to create a majorly onerous situation where there is going to be a lot more staff time required to get these things out? It would be a question that I would have.
No. No. The report that I prepared for you, the monthly, none of these reports are actually come out of our accounting system. They're not standard reports, but fairly easy to create. The monthly report that I provided is, I was able to create that fairly easily. The report by department it would be much more onerous to create at this point. And a check register, we create a check register, every time we create checks. So that report is not, it's a standard report and would come out. So no, that would not, to post that on the website or wherever, or to provide it on council agenda or whatever you would want, that would not be.
Great. And I do want to acknowledge the hard work that staff has gone through to create a 5-year budget plan, to go through the water rate study, to create a 5-year capital improvement plan. I really appreciate the work that we're doing. Going towards more transparency is a positive thing. I'm glad to know that we can do this. Oh, David got a Snickers. So I think that's really great. And I'm glad to hear that it won't be too much to go through this and add to the transparency that Mayor Harrington has brought to our attention.
So, I just have a comment.
Oh.
Thank you. So to be able to look back at 1995, I mean, I've heard the rumors of what was going on. It was a pen and like a general ledger. If money came in for capital improvement, it went on line 23. If money came in for water, it went on line 24. So it was all commingled, obviously very old school possibly, and that's what faced a new city manager, I think. And I won't say the name of the person, but I remember what was discussed, and possibly that's why we never have money or we don't have staff. That's what sort of seemed to be the mantra when I first came here to Sonoma. But it was a very different thing. It has nothing to do with the science of all the things that were your Springboard. Is that the name of it?
Springbrook.
Thank you, Springbrook. It's very different from that general ledger that someone used to write on. It's just turned around probably soon after that. And I would imagine there were a lot of things that happened because of that, because this city was a small town. And that's the way they did things. So to compare us today to then, I think is almost unfair. But I understand, and as I said, I appreciate your looking at these things, because I think it's important. I think we have to be transparent. But I'm not interested in putting the report. I'd love to see a link to maybe that, possibly, not just sitting there on our website, but maybe if people are actually interested, they could go link to that. And that's not really important, but I just think I'd like to just share that.
So maybe just before there's a motion, so I think there's a couple of options in terms of the monthly report from what the conversation in the dais has been. That attachment B, which is a sample monthly report that's been created, that could be again done monthly. You could also then, but again, we're not going to be able to kind of get it by department, which the Muni Code talks about. But I think it gives that overview that I believe Mayor Harrington was looking for. The actual check register, I think it's a question of council. Do you want that like attached to the monthly report on a monthly basis, or is that maybe a link on the monthly report and they're posted on the website? That's kind of a question for the council to give us direction on. I guess I do want to just communicate to the council that as we have come in and looked at your financial operation, there's a lot of work and enhancements that we've been doing, and we've been doing this as staff and then collectively with you. So there's a lot more information on our website than there used to be, and we will continue to do some of this work and continue to make improvements, because it is important that the public have confidence in how we're managing the money, how we're using the money, and that they can look at information and have an understanding. So with that, we're happy to hear any further conversation or direction from the council.
I just want to make one quick comment. I appreciate the staff's work on that. This is not a problem that was created by our current staff. It is an issue, from my perspective, this is an issue that we as a council and staff must resolve. It's an issue that the public has a right to know about. It is contained in our municipal code, and so the fact that we don't comply with our own municipal code is problematic. And so I don't see this as a negative comment about the staff. I see this as a problem that we're working through together and that we're trying to find the appropriate solution. And the reason I brought up 1995 was because there were questions about why our municipal code contained things that were more onerous than other places. And the answer was because we had a huge disaster financially here. And so people were like, well, we're going to do, a belt and suspenders. And I think that's how we got here, which it was more interesting to note. Why are we here today? Why is this in our code? And why do people think it was relevant? But I acknowledge the staff is working very hard to do the best they can do. And there's a lot of work to be done, and people can only work so many hours per week, of course. Acknowledge that, and you're probably working more hours than a normal person would work. That's certain. But thank you very much. But it still is something that we have to address anyway. Despite all those things, we still need to deal with it.
Well, with that, I'd like to make a motion that we do have the audit committee be part of the financial committee, and that we do monthly reporting of the check register. And I like the recommendation of that being a link that would be on our website that public could see also.
Second?
Can I get just a little clarification? Sorry, I want to make sure that we're talking the same items here. So attachment B is the monthly report. So are you talking about that monthly report? Let's call them two different things. There's the monthly report, which is attachment B, which shows kind of, again, what revenues come in year to date and what's been expended. And then there's the posting of what I'll call the check register. So I just want clarity. Are you speaking, when you said the monthly report, are you talking the monthly report and then a link to the check register on the city's website, or are you talking both those things on the council agenda?
I'm talking about both of those things on a link.
Oh, none of them on the council agenda, this one?
Well, I could change that to the motion if it would be easy to have that at the end of the month. If that's, I'll add that into the motion, that it would be on the agenda.
Yeah, consent calendar.
Yes.
Okay, so the motion, and maybe we'll have to have a second, the motion is to have, change the audit committee to a finance committee. The motion is to have the monthly report as shown in attachment B, and the motion is to also place the kind of the check registry summary on the council agenda as well. Is that the motion?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 401.
And sorry, Mayor Harrington and council, I just want to be clear. So there are, I think what we would do, because while there's a monthly report, and I think there is, we're meeting far more of what's said here. We're still not meeting the letter of what
Right.
is described in the Muni Code. So again, my recommendation is, again, we're making moves forward. My recommendation is we would be working with the Muni Code language to review that with the auditor and with the Finance Committee. That's probably could be 3 to 4 to 5 months, kind of a little further out as we get through the audits, et cetera, and work with the committee. Does that make sense? So that there wouldn't be any changes immediately coming back on the Muni Code.
That is the question for the city attorney. So if we don't comply with the Muni Code, it's your advice that that is sufficient as long as we're working on it?
Yes.
Okay. The motion that was just made, I'm sorry, it's getting late for me. Did it include the portion about making the audit committee, the finance committee? It did, okay, sorry.
Yes, it did.
And then are we gonna deal with the resolution concerning the finance director being able to sign the checks?
It
Can
would
we
be-
deal with it?
You sure can. It would be great just to direct us to bring that resolution back and change that. I would rather do that sooner than later, and we would just put on consent to make that modification.
It's this one, take off the finance director. So then you think an appropriate resolution would be including the mayor, the city manager, the city clerk, and the administrative services manager, and just removing the finance director only?
Yes, and the one thing I might do when we bring them back, I do want to talk internally again. Sometimes we've got vacation or it's Christmas and we've got very limited folks, so I might add one other department head as a signature authority on that, but I want to talk that through internally. But basically, we'd bring the resolution back to you, you would review it, probably on a consent calendar, but we would take the finance director off because that position should not be on.
You need a motion for that?
That'd be great to have a motion on that. That'd be great.
You wanna make it? Oh.
I'd like to make a motion to remove the finance director from the signature card.
Can I add in direct staff to bring that back to council with any other additions that we'd like you to consider?
Yes, exactly what you said.
Yes.
Second that.
A roll call?
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Councilmember Vice Mayor Harvey,
Sure.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 401.
Thank you. I'd just like to say it's so fun to have a paper packet. You just pass it around with everyone's to the iPads. Okay. Now we can return to item 6.3. Discussion, consideration, and possible action to adopt a resolution approving and authorizing the Public Works Department to install 2 water bottle filling stations and drinking fountains in the Plaza Park and finding the project exempt under CEQA pursuant to Section 15303 of the state CEQA guidelines.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Harrington and council members and members of the public. So I am Catherine Wall, I'm the Public Works Project Manager. I feel like I need to do a little introduction here since I don't present to the council very often. But I'm lucky to be here to bring this item forward as stated. So I'm here to present the proposal to add 2 new water bottle filling stations with drinking fountains in the Plaza Park. And I thought I would start just with a little background first. So, as the council may remember, on September 5th, 2018, the City Council acted to ban single-use plastics, including plastic water bottles, during special events held at the Plaza and Depot Park through the city's special events policy. And this ban took effect in March 2019, prior to the special event season. Visitors are encouraged to bring reusable water bottles and fill them at the Plaza, and currently, there's only 1 water bottle filling station in the Plaza Park located on the west side. And city staff would like to add 2 new water bottle filling stations for easier access to water. The city's Community Services Environment Commission, CSEC, has a city council approved fiscal year 2018-19 work plan, which includes a waste minimization topic that has a task regarding the addition of water bottle filling stations in the plaza. And the CSEC formed an ad hoc subcommittee to lead this task. Since the Plaza Park is also a historical resource, we also consulted the city's Design Review and Historic Preservation Commission, who also formed an ad hoc subcommittee at their meeting January 15, 2019, to review this task of adding water bottle filling stations. And the ad hoc we had some really great meetings with ad hoc subcommittees and met with city staff regarding this task. on January 29th and February 25th this year. And the ad hoc subcommittees and city staff agreed on 2 new water bottle filling stations with drinking fountains on the east side of the Plaza Park near the northwest corner of the Carnegie Building. This location is optimal for visitors of the plaza, as well as access to water. So there's several improvements that this project would include. So I just wanted to kind of lay that out for everybody. The first piece would be install new underground plumbing that would connect the proposed water bottle filling stations to the existing plumbing for the Carnegie Building. We would also install 1 water bottle filling station with a seated height drinking fountain, and along the northwest, and a second water bottle filling station with a standing height drinking fountain per ADA, along with the northwestern side of the Carnegie Building adjacent to the men's restroom. Then we would place a level concrete pad, approximately 5 feet wide and 20 feet long. And we would also replace a nearby existing drinking fountain and the concrete pad supporting it with a new planter bed area. So that being said, this whole project was supported by the full CSEC and DRHPC. Both commissions took action to advise the City Council to approve the installation of these 2 water bottle filling stations with drinking fountains at the Plaza Park in that location, northwest corner of the Carnegie Building. And I would like to draw your attention to a visual of the existing conditions at the project site, as well as the proposed water bottle filling stations with drinking fountains, which is attached in the agenda packet, as well as a photograph of the existing drinking fountain near the Carnegie Building. And it is our city staff's recommendation this evening to adopt a resolution approving and authorizing the Public Works Department to install these 2 new water bottle filling stations with drinking fountains in the Plaza Park near the northwest corner of the Carnegie Building, and also finding this project is exempt under CEQA. So thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity, and if you have any questions, please let me know. Of course.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
So, I don't know, maybe it's just me and kind of I like symmetry. Is there a reason that the 2 have to be different? So like is that
Yes.
ADA compliance?
Correct. A standing height and a seating height. Water bottle, drinking fountain.
Okay.
So our-
one of them fulfills the requirement for the seating height, drinking fountain. The other one fulfills the requirement for the
Standing height.
standing height
Correct.
water bottle or the
Drinking.
seating height water bottle refilling station.
Drinking fountain.
So can we just do both? I don't know.
Both can't be seating height. There's a standing height requirement.
For the drinking fountain? Yes.
Can we, this is super nitpicky. Can we turn the water bottle filling station to face out so that they both face out? Yeah.
Away from each other.
I just want them to both face the same way, say
Oh.
away from the building.
Oh, out that way.
Okay, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're not saying perpendicular, you are saying,
Just face away from the building.
Face City Hall.
basically saying move this.
Yeah, just turn it 90 degrees.
So it's what I'll call the arm. You want the arm on the outside?
Yeah.
Is that a way to describe it?
Yeah, the arm on the outside, the water bottle filler, just turn it out.
I'm
Is that
sorry,
possible?
I'm not visualizing this, I apologize.
I'll walk over
This
there.
arm is on the outside, and he'd like this arm on the outside. So just flipping it.
We
No.
might be able to, I don't know.
Just, literally all I'm saying is
Yeah.
turn the water bottle refilling station, the one that's on the right, just turn it 90 degrees so it faces away from the building. Because they're both facing the same way. I just think it's like you walk towards the building, there's 2 water bottle refilling stations greeting you there instead of one like being on the side and you got to walk around.
But then somebody might bump into it
Yeah.
Why?
because that's what people do.
No, keep it on the side. Just turn the thing.
All right,
We're confused.
this might be a first.
This is,
This is super silly. If it doesn't happen, it's fine.
no, I want to be able to understand, I'm sorry.
Just this thing. This thing, turn it so it's facing the same way as that one.
Actually, it is.
Can you just turn
I
it?
think it's just a visual.
Yeah.
It's not?
So
Oh, okay.
this is so I'm sorry, the
It's the
shadow is
same.
kind of, so it is facing.
It's facing out.
Yes,
Okay.
it's not, yeah.
Sweet.
Here, Vice Mayor.
Yeah. We will just make sure that if that, I believe it is, but
Yeah.
depending on the actual construction of it.
Yeah, it just looked like it was
yeah.
facing the same way as the door. of the
Yeah,
bathroom.
no, I appreciate that. And there's, yeah, it's the construction of the water bottle filling station itself.
Are there plans to put other ones in, or is this where we're stopping?
This is what we have proposed, and yeah, in the near future as well.
And then this one is pretty far away from the kids' playground that's near there, so hopefully we won't have any issues with that. But are there plans to put in a little bubbler for the kids by the other playground so that everybody has access to a spigot and we don't get full of sand again?
Well, we do have water, little spigots that we've put near the playgrounds, so we're hoping that deters some of the kids going over and using the water bottle filling stations for that purpose.
There's
Near both or just by by both?
Yes,
oh,
that's correct.
yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Good. Great.
Yeah. So, okay.
So I think, again, kids are always going to use water, right? So after those constantly getting clogged up, for lack of a better term, with the sand, we are embracing the kids. They're going to use water. So now there is this spigot they can get water. I will tell you, though, we've seen parents now use the water bottle filling station as a place for Johnny to wash the sand off his hands with the water bottle filling station. It's just, it's a park that gets used
On the
a
west
lot.
side, yeah.
So that, that's why it requires maintenance. That's why it's a full-time job for Public Works to keep things going out there. But I will tell you that, these, again, people are creative, so they're used for not only filling water bottles, but for washing hands. And I do think the spigots, as people get used to them, will hopefully, kids will learn, and that will help remove some of the sand issue we've had with some of these.
Well, I'm sorry, could I just have a suggestion?
Of course.
Possibly attaching Clorox wipes to this these water things, so when people get them dirty, they are dirty all the time. And it's not the park staff, they're just dirty. They're crummy looking all the time, and they don't look sanitary. I'm joking about the box with Clorox wipes, but
Yeah, so I'll let Kat, we've actually had a lot of conversations about this, because the green one that's over between the duck pond and the small kids playground, even staff has talked to the manufacturer, gotten some different things, looked at different ways to clean it, and kids walk over with sand, and I don't know if it's a finish, if it's a color. The one thing I think we did want to clarify with council is because I've heard this concern from council members and members of the public, that green one, staff has tried hard to clean, and it's not gonna get much cleaner than it is. My concern here is, while this shows the green, we actually may wanna look for a different finish. Maybe it's better off if it's silver. This is still, we wanted to bring it to you because we didn't want it to stall.
Sandpaper.
Yeah.
Sandpaper.
yeah,
finish.
So-
stainless steel or something.
So there is, I think there's the finish. Now, I will say the historical preservation and the CSCC liked the green, as I understand it.
It's consistent with the current existing water bottle filling station. It was discussed at the meetings with ad hoc subcommittees about color and concern. Now, this is the only finish that this company authors, LK, which is a very popular company for water bottle filling stations these days. So there is that one finish. It just comes in different colors. So another option would be beige. Is an option. However, something to just consider, it might reduce what it looks. I don't know if you've been out there recently. We tried to clean it off. It has this white look to the water bottle filling station. It does look better than it has in the past. Now, the beige might show more dirt if folks go over there and handprints are put, and people are washing hands and getting sand everywhere. It's possible that, the darker dirt color would still show up, and we would try to clean that off and be regular about it. Does seem to happen every day, potentially. Hopefully the usage in that manner for those water bottle filling stations would change. But, that's a different story. So that is an option, and it would be an option for the council to possibly consider a different color and either put it back to the commissioners or just approve it at this moment.
And then just a quick question. Are there any water bottle refilling stations along the bike path at all?
No.
Okay.
No, this has really been kind of in the last, I think, year. So we've installed probably about a little over a year ago, the first one went in the plaza. Then we installed some out here in the council chambers in the lobby, as a way of, really kind of saying in our own home, we want to promote this. And now we're talking about this. I think this is a trend we're going to continue to look at, going forward on how we can, look at other places for these.
all kidding aside, I think it's a wonderful idea for, just for anyone who goes to the plaza. I think it's just great. It just shows how the open arms of Sonoma. And maybe kids could just wash their hands before they come to the park.
Good idea. We'll put up some signs. We haven't taken it out to the public for a public comment yet. Did you want to have a question? No. I will open this item up to the public for public comment. Please say your name and your address and make your comments.
Okay. Claudia Raniker, 300 2nd Street East. I'm not enthused about them. The city enacted a ban on plastic water bottles, so the city wants to put in 2 water filling stations with drinking fountains to encourage the use of reusable water bottles. That was what I understood it to be, to put them in to discourage the use of reusable water bottles. Providing filling stations to encourage the use of reusable bottles is not congruent to the ban on plastic water bottles. There is no guarantee or solution that only reusable bottles will be used. I'm hearing that they're going to be washing their hands in them too. However, there is a guaranteed solution that is congruent to the banning of plastic water bottles. It is by reinforcing the city's original ban on plastic water bottles. In order to reinforce the city's original ban, the city would not provide any filling stations at all. And if there are not any filling stations at all, there would be no need to pack around any kind of water bottle, reusable or not. The city will then have a 100% ban on plastic water bottles, plain and simple. The water filling stations are an extremely unnecessary accommodation that will create unnecessary carbon emissions, there she is, taking the city farther away from its reduction. However, a new ADA-compliant drinking fountain and regular drinking fountain is a necessary accommodation. And I don't believe that anyone would die of thirst if they didn't have a water bottle attached to their hip. And one more thing. I hope you don't think $7,000 a unit is reasonable, even if the city does have the money. But then again, there's a sucker born every day. They do have wall mount drinking fountains that I noticed online, and there are cheaper versions of stand-up drinking fountains. So that's what I have to say. I think it's unnecessary, and I don't think it's needed. That's just my point.
Anyone else? Mr. Wagner.
Jack Wagner, 270 West Napa Street. Also the Vice Chair of the Community Services and Environment Commission. I just want to thank Council and Mayor for hearing this proposal. This is a lot of hard work by city staff and Public Works. Catherine Wall, Colleen Ferguson, and Trent Hudson, who's not here right now, put a lot of work into this. I think this will go a long way to fulfilling the intent of the single-use plastics ban. It will assist the event organizers and the vendors who have to comply with it. And I think it's going to be aesthetically a little bit of an improvement to the park, especially taking out the puddle with the unused water fountain, about what stage left of the auditorium, which I think is a huge target for sand. So I think that might deter it. I just want to thank you guys, and I ask you to approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one further come to make comments, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the council for comments and a motion.
If there are no comments, I'd like to make a motion.
Sounds good to me.
I'd like to make a motion for a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma approving and authorizing the Public Works Department to install 2 water bottle filling stations with drinking fountains in the Plaza Park, and finding this project is exempt under the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, pursuant to Section 15303 of the state CEQA Guidelines, Class 3, new construction or conversion of small structures.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 401.
And, I'm kind of sad Rachel isn't here because,
This is kind of her thing,
That
yeah.
was her thing, and maybe obviously she wouldn't have left it unless she had to for something else. But I just wanted to,
Acknowledge that.
acknowledge that.
Okay. On to item 6.5. Consideration, discussion, and possible action to review letters of interest received and give direction to Mayor Harrington regarding nominations for appointment to the ABAG MTC Housing Legislative Working Group on behalf of the City Selection Committee. City Clerk.
Well, Mayor and council members, at your last meeting, you did make the first group of these nominations to the mayor to be carried forward to the April 11th meeting. At that time, this particular appointment had not closed yet. It has done so since that time. This is for the ABAG MTC CASA Legislative Task Force. And what the point of this, or the purpose of this task force, is to work with the legislation and with the group appointed by MTC and ABAG, and to work through the session, like I said, the legislative session, and to give feedback relayed to the joint legislative committee and the executive board and the MTC. At the time when this was produced, the committee, or the appointment, was actually, as I said, the ABAG MTC CASA Legislative Task Force. However, the ABAG Executive Board and the MTC Commission made a change to that, and now it's considered the ABAG MTC Housing Legislative Working Group is the new name for this appointment. We are looking for two individual names to be put forward. That's why I mean positions. And the individuals that have submitted letters of interest are Mayor Gina Bellaforte from Roner Park, Mayor Julie Combs from Santa Rosa, and Mayor Harrington from Sonoma. And their copies of their letters are attached.
Thank you. Council questions? I will take it out to the public for public comment.
David?
Hi, Ann.
Hello. I really don't know what this is about. And Colachitas. But I'm going to talk about CASA anyway. I'm not sure what you're trying to do here, but I support you, Amy, in doing that and being on this committee, if that's what it is. I was at Santa Rosa when they had an MTC representative make a full presentation last week. And, there's 2 slides full of legislation that's up there. So this is, that's the heart of CASA and this whole thing. And, like they say about laws and sausages, you might like them, but you don't want to see how they're made. So we're really relying on the people who are on this committee to really drill down into what this is about. And it affects the whole state. So we're talking about CASA, ABAG. How many counties are we talking about here? Is it 9, 12? I don't know. But this
There are 58 counties in
right,
California.
but CASA, I think, is 12, 9, the Bay Area counties. So, but these laws are going to affect, in many cases, the whole state. And, they're trying hard. But as I've said before, we know which ones. The ones with juice are going to go by, and the other ones are going to take people power and also just very heavy lobbying. So I really appreciate your being willing to be on this committee, and I hope you get it, and whatever, and maybe the council, when I sit down, you can tell me what this is really about. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one further, I'll close public comment and open it up to the council for comments. Councilmember Cook.
I'll go ahead and go first. I would like to nominate Mayor Harrington and Mayor Combs from Santa Rosa.
Second.
Can we have some discussion about Mayor Combs? I guess
Yes.
in the original letter that came out about this task force, now called whatever it's called, the idea was that the people who hadn't been involved in the formation of CASA would now be involved, and that's why I put in my letter that I hadn't been on MTC or ABAG, because they wanted new people with different perspectives to be part of it. And then so I was surprised that Councilmember Combs put in her name for it, given that the letter expressly asked for people that were not involved in it. And then the second question is, she is one of the leading proponents of CASA, and this council voted against supporting CASA, and so I guess I'm wondering why we would support her as our nominee.
Well, my thinking was to have one small city and one big city, and I know Mayor Combs, and I think that she does a good job. I know Gina Belforte also. She's on the Golden Gate Transit. She has a lot other duties also. So I was a little concerned that she has so many other appointments that give it over to Mayor Combs, who actually is one big city and having one little city coming from here. So that was my thought process.
Okay.
I support Julie's nomination to this committee as well. I think that she was a proponent of CASA previously, and I think that she has, since the kind of upheaval on MTC, presented a more nuanced opinion. I think that having somebody from Santa Rosa, which if CASA passes is going to be kind of the primary city that it's going to affect in terms of becoming a transportation hub in the future, housing the vast majority of people in the county, I think makes a lot of sense. I think that Julie Combs is a really strong proponent of tenants' rights and of the protection aspect of the CASA compact, and in that way I support her. So that's why I don't know Gina Belforte very well. So maybe that's something to consider. But for me, I think Julie's shown leadership on the housing issues in Santa Rosa. I think she's very well versed in it, and I think she would serve the committee well, and has shown a real kind of understanding of what the problems are for Sonoma County and CASA. But that's where I would stand.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call?
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries 4-0.
Council member reports and comments, item 7. Anyone? No? City manager, comments and announcements.
Yes, briefly. So I just want to, we will be putting out a press release tomorrow, and I've got flyers to announce the dates of the Housing Town Hall series. So there will be 3 of them. The first one will be kind of focused on learning. It'll be Housing 101 on April 25th from 6 to 8. The second will be called Discuss, a housing experts panel on May 16th from 6 to 8. And then the last is really an Explore, and this will be a community workshop, a hands-on community workshop on June 20th from 6 to 9. All of them will be in Vintage House. We'll have some kind of light refreshments to keep folks enthused and energy as we're going up, and we are looking at trying to provide some childcare for school-age kids as well. So these are sponsored by the city. I want to thank Vice Mayor Harvey and Councilmember Hundley that has been deeply involved with staff on this, myself and David Storr, and then Jim Hyde, our consultant with Urban Green, is putting all the pieces together. So I know this is something councils want to do for quite some time. I think we're going to be doing it well, and excited to have this roll out for the community.
Wonderful, thank you. City attorney, reports and comments.
Just a short one. You know that I sent you a blurb announcing the Fair Political Practices Commission new rule on real property interests and conflict of interest. And that applied to council members who own their own real property, including their home, the 500 to 1,000 foot rule. For those council members who rent their home and have a rental agreement that's longer than 30 days, the rule has changed also, and I want to just briefly alert you to its provisions. The new rule provides that if you have such a rental arrangement and there is a decision that you are about to make as a council member, you're disqualified from making that decision if the decision will change the termination date of your lease, increase or decrease the potential rental value of your property, change your actual or legally allowable use of the property, or impact the official's use and enjoyment of the property. So if any of those things are triggered by virtue of a potential decision that you make as a council member, you need to step down and recuse yourself from participating in that decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
so we do have maps that we'll be providing to council and be getting those out to you.
Well,
Just start hopping from Airbnb to Airbnb.
great. Yeah.
And before we adjourn, I just wanted to remind everyone the dedication to Mrs. Weinberger for this evening. And I will get the address.
Wonderful. Thank you. And with that, the meeting's adjourned.
Au revoir.